my heart had stopped. I moved from this state of consciousness to one so expansive and suddenly found myself on a grassy hill. And there was a tree at the top of the hill. I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. I'm so happy. I was whole and I wasn't alone. There was a guide or an angelic figure there. He felt like my best friend. He said, "Welcome, David. It's great to see you."
My guest today is David Maginley, who had a near-death experience. So, David, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Great to be here with you.
Great to be here with you. So, you had an incredible, validated death experience because it happened for you in a hospital. So, I would love you to just share your experience in any way you would like to.
Okay, so yeah, it happened in a hospital, which is a good place to die because you got some medical coverage, and I was actually in training. I was on internship as a Lutheran pastor, and we have to do a 1 year internship in a parish, and part of that involves doing services in the hospital. So I didn't know at the time, but I had a form of cancer called paranganglioma. And this was actually my second tumor. My first was when I was 17 years old. And I didn't know another one had grown back. And I was now 27. And this kind of cancer, as I share on a lot of podcasts, creates chemicals like catecholamines, dopamine, in really high doses. So when your adrenal gland turns on, it triggers the tumor to blow, which is so dangerous. Most people die in about a minute. Your blood pressure goes through the roof. It's a quick exit, and smaller explosions cause high blood pressure, sweating, heart palpitations, stomach cramps. It's very unpleasant, and I've had a lot of those. Well, there I am doing a church service, and public speaking is a very adrenaline triggering kind of event. And I was a young, introverted, nervous new guy. So I was not really confident. And since then, I've learned how to tap into that adrenaline and use it as fuel for a deeper engagement with my audience and my congregation. But boy, this time I got up there to give the message. I'm about 30 seconds into it, and I can feel the effects starting. My heart's starting to race, getting a little dizzy. And I'm trying to pull it together, right? Because my ego does not want to get embarrassed again. I don't want to pass out. One of the jokes I usually say, and it's very true, is I put a lot of people to sleep on a Sunday morning, but it's not good when the pastor becomes unconscious. And I collapsed, which is terrifying for the congregation, for everyone who's there. It's not terrifying for me once I'm out. I'm gone. And I had collapsed so many times, I had passed out, that I thought, okay, oh, great, here it comes again. And this is going to be really embarrassing. But it turned out to be so much more. Now, I at this point had been to, I'd gone to church for years, worshiped on Sunday, but this was actually the only Sunday I feel I truly worshiped, because this was the only service in which I had such a deep, authentic, expansive connection to God. It was a love and a joy like I'd never imagined. And we're taught all about this in seminary, right? You study the scripture, you hear the accounts in the Bible, how Jesus is trying to describe heaven, and he just can't do it because directly they're never going to get it. So he has to use metaphor. He has to use imagery and story. Well, the heaven is like this, or it's like that. Because if I tell you directly, you're just not going to, the rational mind cannot comprehend it. It's too big, it's too much. And so I was temporarily transformed. I moved from this state of consciousness to one so expansive, and suddenly found myself on a grassy hill. And there was a tree at the top of the hill, and there was a quality, not only to the environment, which was more vivid than I can describe, more beautiful in its simplistic presentation. A grassy hill with a tree at the top. And yet, the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. I knew every blade of grass. I was connected to everything. The light was flowing through me, and I was one with that. And the joy and completion and integration. Right? I talk about this a lot when I'm trying to share the story. It's not only that I was in a different, deeper, fundamentally more real reality than this one, but I was also more real, because suddenly I didn't have a subconscious or a persona or an ego. I was integrated. I was healed in the architecture of my consciousness. I was whole, which is a core meaning of the word salvation. And so I was home. That's the word that so many people use to describe this. You're suddenly home. And I was jumping up and down, overjoyed, filled with love, saying, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home, I'm so happy. And I wasn't alone. There was a guide or an angelic figure there. And it was masculine. He felt like my best friend. A lot of people say, well, what did he look like? And I can only describe him as love and compassion and wisdom and full presence. But it was a masculine, angelic, transcendent entity that was nonetheless felt like my best friend. I felt this familiarity with him, and I knew he knew me, every dimension of who and what I am. And he said, welcome, David. It's great to see you. And I said, it's so great to be here. Come on, let's run to the tree. And I was repeatedly imploring him, let's go to the tree. And he said, you can't go up there. We need to talk about your life. And in near-death experiences, you often hear about a border beyond which you cannot cross. The top of the hill was my border, and I knew if I got to that, I wouldn't come back to this. So a deep sense of me knew that I was no longer on the physical plane, and I was no longer here, or I was no longer this that you're looking at right now. I knew if I got there, I wouldn't come back. But I also realized I wasn't going to win the argument. There was no way he was going to let me go up to the hill, and I didn't want to leave his company. We walked. We talked about my life, and there was such friendship, such deep awareness of how important life is. He said, you actually can't stay here. Things are going really well for you, but you can't stay here. You have to go back. And he was referring to my human development, not just becoming a pastor, but how I was growing spiritually as a human being. I never would have used that qualifier. I never would have imagined that fundamental and ultimate aspect of my development was going well. Because frankly, I was a young guy who was both naive and arrogant and stumbling along, trying to find my way like everyone else. There's no way I could see the big pattern, but he knew it. And he just assured me things are going really well. But you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of growing up to do, and you can't stay here. So that planted in me this sense of purpose, responsibility, intention. And I knew that if later I came to understand that if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. We are here to shine, to reveal God's light, our fundamental nature, to reveal and be instruments of this love. And I knew one of the things he imprinted or imparted to me is that God is love. So love is your spiritual practice. Love is not an emotion. That's why I'm not so much interested in the content of people's belief system as I am in the quality of their love. It's important to have a belief system or a theology or a framework that's robust and has integrity. But the rubber hits the road. The bottom line is, how do you love? How are you an instrument of love? Well, I protested and I said, look, I really don't want to go back to that. You can't send me back to that. Not after I've experienced and touched upon this. I wasn't going to win. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and I'm there on this grassy hill. I can feel the tree drinking in the light. I can feel the wonder that's just on the other side of that hill. And yet that was no less a majesty than I was experiencing right now in his company. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he poured even more understanding and love and compassion into me. And he said, don't worry, it won't be a long time. We will be with you and we'll see you again. And with that, I was back, which is always the hardest part. Because now you move from an expansive state of integrated consciousness and you're compressed back into this, where your thoughts have to flow one after the other and your words are completely inadequate to describe and communicate what is within your heart. And you're feeling separate from each other and from everything else. And we're all stumbling along in this functional delusion that we're separate from each other, right? Instead of, in the Christian faith, it talks about being one, being in Christ, right? Which is to be one in love, one in consciousness, and he said in a prayer, may they be in Garden of Gethsemane, may they be one even as you and I are one, you and me, us and them. That's really hard in this world that seems to be tearing itself apart. So I've concluded that we all are suffering from a form of spiritual insanity, thinking that we're separate from each other and separate from love and that God is far away. No. In fact, all of reality emanates from and is sustained by this foundational consciousness of love we call God. So there's no separation. And I've come to see Jesus as the one who fully manifested and walked that. He didn't forget who he was. But I have a really poor memory. And I'm always I'm always forgetting, even now. And so I'm always asking for help, and I'm always trying to shine in my own little way.
I
I've been
love
homesick.
that so much, David. And I love the last thing that you said, because I know people who watch interviews and experiences like this kind of feel like you have the golden ticket. You know, whatever it took to get there, the benefit and the reward surpasses all of that, because now you're just enlightened. And it's just not true, because we still fall into the human patterns because we're living a human experience. So I'm so glad that you said that, because it makes your experience so much more relatable to people.
And it didn't take me long to be fully human again, because as soon as I woke up and recovered, I found myself on the floor of the chapel, and the nurse and the doctor were there, and there were people around, and they were saying, "David, David, can you hear us?" And I learned I had been gone for about 15 minutes. You know, my heart had stopped. They had tried to revive me. I didn't feel any pain from when they do CPR or anything like that. Uh, but immediately my ego jumped in, and I felt embarrassment. And my first words were, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I scared everyone. I'm sorry I passed out. I'm sorry I did this." Right? All the while, like within the first few seconds of recovering, you know that heavenly, loving, transcendent state, but now it's receding, it's sinking away from you like a stone in the ocean, and you're grasping for it, but there's no way you can get it. You can't hold it in the rational mind. It lives in you, and you're forever homesick for something that you can't articulate, right? Because the poverty of words are not adequate. And yet, um, I trust that they've been with me all along, right? Angelic guides, right? New understanding of things like the Holy Spirit, new understanding of the nature of grace, new understanding of the scriptures, new understanding of Jesus, new understanding of who and what I am, and perpetual homework in learning how to love. We're all walking each other home.
We are. So I feel like every single interview has a theme to it, which is we don't have words on our human language to describe this. But moreover, the even less adequate than the human words are is the human brain to contain an experience like this, because there's nothing else on earth that you can liken it to hitch the wagon, to be like, oh yeah, I'll just remember that because it's like that. I think that's why it's so hard to hold that in the brain.
Yeah, there's very good insight into how the brain is likely a reducing valve, something that filters out the vast majority of reality as it truly is. And so what we experience is this incredible distortion of reality. And that we perceive it in that way for only one purpose, and that's to facilitate our biological survival on the physical realm. Um, you know, I can only see things in the visible spectrum of light. People are looking at the screen, or they're listening. We can only hear and see things in certain frequencies. But there's the electromagnetic field goes far beyond that. So I wonder if spiritual sight, I wonder if Jesus could look at someone and see the energy field about them and read their entire life, if there is a way that we can widen our field of vision so that we can perceive. But it's always got to be balanced with the ego, which is going to hijack any spiritual awakening in a moment. It's eager to do that. And the ego defines itself in terms of separation. Right? and attachment to its own structure of identity. I like to say that the ego, maybe this is charitable, but the ego is functional and healthy as a process through which consciousness can have experience, but it's unhealthy when it attaches itself to an experience and says, I am that, or I am this, or I am something separate. We're all doing this difficult homework. Your spiritual practice, it doesn't leave your ego content and happy. It actually renders it undone. It dismantles your ego so that it's not me, right? But Christ in me, or God in me, or love in me, right? Whatever term you want to use, it's universal. So how can I devote myself to disappearing? Inconsistently. That's how I do it.
Wow. When you were talking about, you wondered if Jesus could look at people and see the energy field. You reminded me of that movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson,
Yeah.
where she ingested a substance that was similar to the chemical that women produce when they're pregnant. And it caused her brain to, instead of develop like a baby would, it caused it to get more and more intelligent, use more and more of the brain until she could see the energy emanating from everybody. And I often think about that when you say something like that.
Right. And then there's a story where Jesus is in this crowd and everyone's pressing in on him because they want a piece of the action. They want to touch him. They want to, right. And there's this woman who she's had a menstrual flow for years and years and years. She's really desperate because not only does it mean she's weak, ritually she was unable in the Jewish customs to go into the temple. She was ostracized from her community, and so she's like, if I just sneak up behind him and touch the hem of his robe, maybe that'll work. I was like, that's a gutsy move, because she could actually be executed for touching a rabbi when she is ritually unclean. That was the law of the land at the time. And she's like, I don't care. It's my only hope. And so she just touches the hem of his robe and then pulls back, doesn't want to be found out. And he stops and he looks around and he goes, who touched me? And the disciples are going like, what are you talking about? Everyone's touching you. We're all pressed in. And he goes, no, no, no. I felt energy flow from me. Somebody touched me. And he finds her. And all he says is, basically, don't be afraid. Your faith has made you well. Your faith has saved you. Right? Just go in peace. Everything's restored. And he was so gentle and compassionate and casual about this. But her life in all dimensions was restored biologically, society, and communally, psychologically, emotionally, everything. Wow. There's this sacred energy flowing through us. It's all flowing from it. And many who have a near-death experience find themselves more attuned to that. And but it's something our culture is even now bumbling with, and there's more conversation about it thanks to podcasts like yours, thanks to some really good research in science that's changing our nature of understanding of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you shared that. Let's talk a little bit about Jesus. I know he wasn't necessarily in your NDE, you named it as God, but you did say that Jesus to you was the embodiment of love. So Christ equaling love. And I think that there's some type of a connection to that. But with your studying, with your experience on the other side, who do you think Jesus, Yeshua, was?
Oh, as a Christian pastor, I do feel that he's the full incarnation of God's presence, right? Fully human. But more than that, not, and none of this is an exclusive claim about Jesus, right? Um, because we're talking about the nature of love itself made human. That is universal in its dimension, but it had to be translated, you could say, into the human form, the human language, so we get it at an optimal time. I regard him as, you know, again, how do you put it into words? It's not about believing in him, right? It's believing into him, into like knowing you're one, not in divine, how do you put it? It's not in a way that the ego can claim by saying something like, you know, I am God. That's not the case. You're this expression, this facet, this energetic, artistic, creative expression of this love, right? That's why the term children of God is often much more accurate and apropos. But think of it. If God is the ultimate, infinite, indivisible foundation of reality, then that means existence has many objects, and we're looking at them right now, including my body. But the objects don't have any existence on their own. That's a paradox. And here's Jesus, I think, able to see and know reality as it truly is, and knows himself, never forgets who he is. Though in the wilderness, he was pushed to his limits in a process I call ego deconstruction. So I don't have adequate words. There's this intimate and transcendent sense of this divine, loving human presence flowing through all of us. The key is, ironically, you know, he didn't say worship me, right? He said follow me, be like me, do as I do, be as I am. That's, you know what? I think that's harder than believing in him. That's harder. I get all that all mixed up. I find it much easier to be me, and me and my ego, which is the part of me I enjoy the most.
By design.
Yeah.
By design, for the human experience, really.
Right. For the human experience. But I'm grateful because my near-death experience, it took years for me to integrate, to translate, to find a framework for, and to realize I'm not the only one. In fact, they're incredibly common. 1 in 10 who have a brush with death will have a near-death experience.
Isn't that a 1 in 10 who have a brush with death will have one?
And 1 in 5 who have a cardiac episode will have one.
Yeah.
Wow. Really common.
That is pretty common. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the details of your NDE, because you had some really interesting parts that I want to dig in a little bit deeper to. So the first thing I want to start with is the tree. And the reason I'm going to start with the tree is that I'm a tree fanatic. I'm associated with Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, guy who founded that had a near-death experience. An angel came to him, gave him a manifesto that was written by him, but it wasn't from him, telling him to go clone all the ancient trees of the world. And I really believe trees are sentient beings, and the way that you described that chemical mediators that accumulated in your body for the cancer, trees also disseminate and disperse chemicals that actually protect people from all kinds of different things. Every breath that we take is because of them. And I think that they're antennas, and they have these mycelium connectivity. Yes, and they're all connected, and they help each other. When I think this is one of the most fascinating things about a tree is that when they're dying and the tree knows it's dying, it releases all of its carbon that's stored for the benefit of all, because it sees itself as connected to all. It's almost like one of the best examples of unconditional love that we have on the planet next to the pets, about how they walk the walk and talk the talk about we're one in every way.
Did you read the book, The Secret Life of Trees?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And that was written several decades after another book, The Secret Life of Plants. And there's a third, The Secret Life of the Soil. All
Not
show,
read those other ones.
yeah. Robert Becker was a expert, worked for the CIA, an expert in lie detection. And on a dull day, he took his lie detector machine and he hooked it up to a house plant. And he found it was reacting to his thoughts. And so he conducted a bunch of experiments and discovered that all life forms will pick up on the electromagnetic field of each other, which means there's no such thing as a private thought.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've only shared this maybe once or twice out of all the interviews I've ever done. I did a video. There was a book that I read a long time ago called E Squared, Energy Squared. And it's all about these experiments that you could do to prove to yourself that your mind was able to manifest. And one of the experiments had you take an egg carton and plant these green bean seeds in them. And you're supposed to separate them into two parts, one that you just plant, and then one that you talk to and you connect with, and then you measure them over like a 12-day period. Well, I took one seed on the side that was supposed to be the ones that you talk to, and I put it in my hand and I physically sent it love, and I special talked to it. And then I planted all of these and I had them all marked, and you water them the same. They're in the same location. They're all together. And at the end of the experiment, the ones that were spoken to were definitely taller, but my plant wasn't any different until 3 days later. My plant grew like 5 inches above all the rest of them. I have videotapes of this. It was just absolutely incredible. And like, if you want to do an experiment yourself to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are a powerful soul and that your thoughts count, that one was beyond proof for me.
So there's a researcher, her last name is Gronowski. I'm embarrassed that I have Gianella. I've forgotten her first name. I'm sorry.
Maybe you guys send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes, because people love to take all these little gold nuggets that you have and, explore them, because these conversations are so interesting on people's spiritual journey, no matter where they are in the journey, right?
Yeah, and they wake us up to our potential and they help us at least imagine that you're more than you seem.
Beautiful.
In this experiment, she was working with bone cancer in petri dishes. And the practitioner, the healer, placed their hand over the petri dish with the sample of the bone cancer. And they had 3 of them, a control group and the cancer group and the third healthy group. And what they found was, by directing compassionate, loving intention, which you do by getting out of your own way. And, for myself, I'm like, I get out of my way and I say, okay, Lord, flow through me. It's you. It's all you. And what they found was the cancer cells died at an accelerated rate, and the healthy tissue grew at an accelerated rate, both in the amount of calcification upon the bone tissue, as well as the diversification of the calcium. And this has been repeated countless times with living animals. But this is a lovely experiment because it's a petri dish with cells in it, so you can see the effect.
How cool. So
right?
let's go back to the tree, because you did mention it. I had written down that I wanted to ask you about the tree, and then you started describing that it was like the most beautiful tree you've ever seen. Explain what this tree is and what this tree felt like. And I think it's important that it was in your experience.
Well, I felt fully connected to it. I knew it was, as was the land and everything around me, not some inert, unintelligent object. It was this magnificent, beautiful expression of the love. And it knew that. And I knew it was drinking in the light through the branches and drinking in the nutrients from the soil. And I just felt this, I can't describe it. There are no words. This sense of uh, of wisdom centralized in that object up there. And I knew it represented something. Everything represents something. Right? Was I on a grassy hill with a tree? Well, that's what I experienced. But I'm sure it's more than that. I'm wondering if things are presented to us in a way that we can comprehend.
Have you ever seen a tree since your near-death experience that resembled that tree?
No, but all trees are now very special. All plants, all life is. Yeah, I'm aware that everything is interconnected and everything is wise. And if I could only tune into that and listen to it, then I could remember that I'm part of that wisdom too.
You said that even the grass seemed like it was alive.
Yeah. Oh yes, every blade of grass. I knew it all. Right. That St. Paul in Corinthians, he has this interesting statement. He says, "Then, right? For now, we only know it in part, but then, when we're transcended, right? When we're transformed, when we've died and moved to that expansive state, then we will know ourselves even as we are fully known." What an interesting thing to say. It indicates some mysteries. One of them is I actually am incapable of understanding and knowing myself from inside my own experience. I cannot accurately see it except through the filters of my ego and this biological apparatus and the story of me. But God knows me in full. And one day I will come to understand, I will know myself as well that way and know everything. But for now, the download remains incomplete and I bumble along in my humanity. And I try to shine in one way.
Bumbling along. So you also had an experience directly with God. And did God present himself in that experience as a certain age to you that you'd be like, oh, this was this age?
No, God was the love and the light. God didn't appear as a form. I could say that's God. Right? There was this.
So it wasn't human looking, in other words. It wasn't like the old man on the throne that they picture in the Bible.
No, there was this guardian angel, this guide, right? And he didn't wear a name tag, right? Or a label.
Doggone it. They should be required.
But I knew he felt like my best friend. He felt like it was so wonderful. But that wasn't the God, right? Certainly his representative. But God was the love and the light and the everything. And, there wasn't a tunnel of light for me, like there is for many people. I didn't see that bright light that they say, that's God. Right? I was suddenly on the hill. And this is typical. Every near-death experience is unique to the individual.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, because its overarching themes always remain consistent. You die, you're changed, you go to another realm, you're greeted or you encounter other entities, whether you can see them or not, but you sense them. You're given information, and then you're sent back. And you're changed because of it, right? Your whole relationship to life. Now, that change may take years to integrate, and you're not consistent with it, but you know, and you are forever homesick for what you had become. Now, as you filter down through periods of time or culture or language, or down through age and cognitive development, and then into personal story, it becomes very specific. So in the practical sense, when I die, I'm probably going to be greeted by my parents and grandparents because your ancestors are frequently front of the welcoming committee. but I won't see yours. It'll be individual for me. And many have a life review. Well, it's their life that's reviewed, not other people's life. So it gets more specific to the individual, which makes sense. You know, there's a passage that says he knows every hair upon your head, right? Knows you to the cellular level and beyond. So it's going to be unique and specific for you to spiritually evolve and wake up to the love that you have emanated from.
So you also said that you're walking along with God. You're 27 years old and you are reviewing events of your life, but it didn't sound like a life review. So can you remember any specific event that was highlighted in that conversation?
Unfortunately, no. The entity I walked with, we talked about my life, and he said things are going really well, but you have a lot more work to do. And I felt like I wasn't permitted to know exactly what that was. I wasn't permitted to know the plan, but simply that there is a purpose and stuff for me to do. And boy, did that ever turn out to be bigger than I imagined, because I became a hospital chaplain. And for 25 years, I've supported people in the cancer, palliative, and intensive care units of a major hospital. And I've been with hundreds and hundreds as they've died, and thousands as they've negotiated with mortality. And of all faiths and no faith. And it's surprising how frequently, as they die, people see an angelic being, a spirit entity, their ancestors, their grandparents, you know, a loved one who's passed on. And they feel profoundly safe when they have these experiences. And they're no longer afraid of death. And this usually begins with lucid dreaming of celestial realms or just paradise. And
You mean you would go in and talk to these people and they would share lucid? Tell us a little bit about that. That's interesting.
yeah, it was very common in the palliative unit. So common that I eventually would sit down and say, have you been any place interesting lately?
I love that lead in.
And they go,
A great question.
and I say, well, how are your dreams? And they say, well, actually, I dreamt I was with my grandmother, and we were in this beautiful field of flowers and the forest. It was just so amazing. And as they're sharing this, they also usually emphasize how casual and normal it felt at the time. It's on reflection that you recognize how at home and how real and yet unexplainable, ineffable the whole thing was. And they hesitate to share it with a doctor or others, because they worry that, oh gosh, was this medication, or am I just hallucinating, or it just feels too special, and they don't know how to put it into words. Dr. Christopher Kerr, he's a wonderful gentleman at Buffalo Hospice in New York. He did a nice study, really good study, Kerr, Kerr, of thousands of people approaching death. And he found that almost 90% experience nearing death awareness, which is this expansion of consciousness. And it began in lucid dreaming, which could start months to weeks before they die. And then it would escalate. And it happens momentarily, right? It's not a protracted phenomenon. So you've got to be embedded at the bedside if you're going to witness it. You can't just be dropping in and out, which is why family members report the apparition, the shifting consciousness, and then nurses report it. And I was so honored that when I was with my father as he died, he experienced it. And his friend at 4 a.m, sitting by his side, reported that dad, despite pancreatic cancer and his body wasting away in the edema or fluid in his belly and his inability to lift himself, he nevertheless regained consciousness after almost 24 hours of not saying a thing. And he lifted himself up and he was looking up with joy on his face. And he said, yes, yes. And he named people who had died. He says, I'm ready. Come, come. And he saw them. And this is not uncommon. So consider, let's not look upon heaven as some abstract promise from an ancient religion. Let's not argue about, is there a God? Because the real question in our day and age is, what is consciousness? And if you understand what consciousness is, you understand the nature of reality. And that this is a universal phenomenon, occurs throughout humanity. And then you get these luminary figures, these unique people who are manifestations of the love, and they're more tuned in, right? And, personally, in my own Christian tradition, I see Jesus as the ultimate of this. We're all here to wake up.
So David, you mentioned that when you were a hospital chaplain, you were talking to all of these different people, different denominations, different faith, of no faith, and they're having these experiences.
Yeah.
Do you feel, because I know the Christian religion has rules about who goes to heaven and who doesn't.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your take on that, because, and the reason I'm really interested in this is because you said something that I really listened to, which was, I think it's important for people that we grow in spirituality as human. You didn't say to grow in religion. And there's a big difference between religion and spirituality in what I've studied and understand.
Yeah. So a healthy religion is one that helps you practice your spirituality, helps you connect to love, helps you be love, right? But you do it in a corporate sense. And each religion has its own doctrines and rituals and customs to help calibrate your consciousness to love. We don't tend to regard morning worship as that, but I bet a lot of Christians who might be listening to this have experienced it. It's the purpose of hymns. It's the purpose of prayer, right? It has an exponential power when you do it collectively. I do not believe that any religion can make an exclusive claim on the path of salvation. We do not have a copyright on God. Right? And Jesus, for me, yes, is my Lord, but that doesn't mean he's bigger than that. It's the ground of being. It's the very core of my existence to be in relationship with this love, and I do it through this love made human in that man. I'm always asking for help because honestly, as I say, I'm stumbling and bumbling and trying to get out of my own way so that love can shine.
Beautiful, like so beautiful. I do think so many people put God in a box. They have this vision of it being a human-like man that sits on the throne. And from my experiences on the other side, I don't even like to use the word God anymore. Use it when I talk on these, in these interviews, but I prefer the word source, because it is the source of all love. On the other side, we are love. Here we experience love. But in my experience, there was nothing outside of that source. So everything was within that source. I mean, I guess you could look at it as like a container and it's all inside of it, but it was everything. So that meant it was me. It was you. It was the tree we were talking about, my dog. It's all of it looking out through our eyes, having an experience of being love, because on the other side, it is love. And I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Imagine reaching a state of awareness where there is nothing you can look upon where you do not see the signature and the imprint of the sacred presence. How can I honor the sacred presence in you, especially when you're not honoring it in yourself? If you're attacking me, if you're criticizing, if you're emphasizing your separateness, your individuality, instead of our shared communal existence in God's love, we're all we're all wrestling with this. There's a musician, I don't know who it was, but he said, God is the name for a blanket we throw over the mystery to give it shape. Right?
Beautiful. Wow.
Because in the end, any words you have, any belief system you have is going to fall far short of the reality of what's out there. And the wisest thing you can do is land in a place of silent reverence and awe and wonder. And so go look at the stars at night. Feel small. Go love your neighbor. Go be kind to the person who scares you. Go step out of your comfort zone and find God in disguise all around you.
Wow, David. I wanted to ask you one more question, but I kind of feel like that statement's like a mic drop statement. I don't want any other question to take away from what you just said. And I hope people rewind and listen to that again.
Well, that'd be great because I don't remember what I said.
I love that too. So, David, I would imagine there are people who are listening right now who would love to connect with you. So, how do people do that? What are you working on?
Well, before they connect with me, I'd encourage them to check out some really great teachers like Father Richard Rohr at the Center for Action and Contemplation. Right. I'm speaking especially to those who have a Christian faith, because if you're uncomfortable with this material, then keep wrestling with it and dig deeper. Dig deeper. Where can you find me? I have a website, davidmaginley.com.
Let's spell it for people who are listening.
Yeah, Maginley. So davidmaginley.com. I provide counseling. I also have workshops, and I have an online course on spiritual resilience, and you can link to that through the website. And that's a beautiful new development. I have 2 books out. One of them is called Beyond Surviving Cancer and Your Spiritual Journey. So if you're facing cancer or you're supporting someone who is, this will help you, support you. It's a heavy, difficult, beautiful, emotional read. So bring Kleenex. The other book is even heavier. It's called Early Exits. Spirituality, Mortality, and Meaning in an Age of Medical Assistance in Dying. And that's about euthanasia and spirituality. So that's really heavy. I wrote that because euthanasia is legal in Canada.
I did not know that. And, I had to do that with 2 of my dogs. And it's the hardest thing, but it's also a magical thing when you look back on it later. It's hard when you're doing it, but later you realize, wow, it was really time. And I probably maybe even waited too long.
We did the same. We waited too long with our dog.
So easy to do because you can't see it in front of you.
Yeah. So I just put a blog post on my website on the difference between euthanizing a human and euthanizing an animal.
I love that. Wow. What's the main difference?
The main difference is a human has an ego identity. I'm asserting, based on really deep research, because there's a lot of footnotes, that an animal, like a dog, doesn't have an ego. It has a personality. It can experience things like trauma and memory and attachment, but it doesn't have an ego. And so requests for euthanasia from people, from patients, from the dying, are driven predominantly by existential distress, not by physical suffering. We euthanize an animal because they are in physical suffering and it's unnecessary and it's not functional. For humans, now, I know we're wrapping up and this is a heavy one to draw.
I'm totally fine with
For
this.
humans, there's no need to experience unnecessary physical suffering. If you're dying and you're in a hospital, you have medical care, there's no need to experience that. And so when that's well managed, suffering becomes a functional process that deconstructs the ego to calibrate us to the final stage of human development, which is transcendence, exhibited by nearing death awareness. And that's only one facet of why I'm asserting euthanasia is wrong, not an appropriate intervention, because you're using a medical procedure to treat what is fundamentally a spiritual condition, the deconstruction of the ego. People are not familiar with dying in our culture.
Yeah.
It's institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
And they understandably are scared of it. But it's the most natural thing in the world. The handoff is perfectly safe. It's up to the team on our side to make sure your takeoff has as little turbulence as possible. And the team on the other side, well, they're very good at what they do. So there's no need to have such a rough road. Talk about your mortality. Say the four most important words: I love you, thank you, forgive me, and goodbye. Reconcile your relationships. Make peace with your past. Open to the mystery that's waiting for you, which is actually the mystery of what you are. And as Dr. Christopher Kerr's research and so much more research reveals, our consciousness automatically will shift to expansive transcendent states. Let's control the pain well through medication, and let's support the soul well through compassionate, loving presence. And let's guide the dying through wisdom and trust in the process.
Wow. I would love to know what you took away from David's experience. What hit you the hardest in what he experienced and had to say today? And even if all you did was just get to the end here and you just want to write waking up the collective, all those comments really help the channel. I'm going to ask you a question that I love to ask people, which is, David, what do you feel like you know for sure?
I know that God is love, and that you will continue after your body does not. So if you focus on your love, you're going to be doing your best spiritual practice. You got a lot of questions. I got a lot of questions for the boss when I get there. For now, focus on your love, and we're all walking each other back home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, David, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your wisdom, your insights, for your vulnerability in sharing these stories, and for taking a stance that may not be completely in alignment sometimes with the religion that you're coming from, and your willingness to deeply dig into these topics to help people maybe have a new perspective based on your experience. So thank you so much for what you are doing to wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's lovely chatting with you.
Of course, thank you. And of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you who tune in to watch, to listen, and to share these beautiful experiences with somebody who needs them. So if you still have questions, you can join me for Wake Up Wednesdays live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody, for watching. There's a reason you found this video. These stories awaken something ancient inside us. Hit subscribe and stay on the path with us.